Today is February 25th, 2013, and we are interviewing Michael Kirkton at the Gridley Public Library. And Michael was born September 24th, 1962. And my name is Cheryl Walker, and I'll be interviewing Mr. Kirkton. Michael, could you state for the record what branch of service you served in?
Yes, I was in the United States Army.
And what was your rank?
I retired as a lieutenant colonel in 2005.
Okay, when did you join the service?
I actually joined the service, went into the Army in 1981, went to basic training in 1981, and then I actually attended a military college to get my commission as an officer in the Army. I was commissioned as a second lieutenant in 1983, went on active duty in 1985.
Was that called officer cadet training? Or
No, it was a military college called New Mexico Military Institute, and it was through the ROTC program there at the college that I was commissioned through. If that makes sense. And at that time, or still is, that was a junior college, what they called a military junior college. You got a commission, and then you could either go on active duty then or get your last 2 years of college. And so I came back here and completed my undergrad degree in Bachelor's of Science in Political Science from Illinois State University, and then went on active duty from there.
okay, when you went on active duty, where were you stationed?
Initially, I went to Fort Benning, Georgia for officer training as an infantry officer. And I was at Fort Benning, did what's called the basic course, and I also went to airborne school, the mortar platoon leader officer course, and U.S. Army Ranger School there at Fort Benning. And my first assignment as a brand new infantry lieutenant was in the Republic of South Korea. I was with the I don't remember the unit I was with. I just drew a blank all of a sudden. I'd have to go back and look it up.
Okay. So how long were you there?
I was only in South Korea for about 14 months, and then I was brought back to the States and was at Fort Irwin, California. The Fort Irwin, California is the U.S. Army National Training Center. Units would come in, rotate in to do field training exercises against a opposing force, and I was there for a little over 2.5 years at Fort Irwin, California as a what they call an observer controller, helped train the units that rotated in, and I was also the aide-de-camp to the commanding general at the National Training Center for a little over a year.
And then from there, what did you do?
From Fort Irwin, I attended the Armor Officer Advanced course for captains. Was at the Armor Officer Advanced course just a little over 8 months, and then I was posted to the 1st Cavalry Division at Fort Hood, Texas, after completing the advanced course. At Fort Hood, as a captain, I was initially on staff and then was given command of Alpha Company, 1st Battalion, 5th Cavalry, where deployed that company to Desert Shield, Desert Storm, and then came home and was at Fort Hood for a little over 3 years.
When you're talking about a cavalry division,
Yes.
My first impression of a cavalry division is Civil War.
Right.
And, horses and going down. Can you explain what the cavalry division is now?
Yeah, that's based on lineage and the history of Army regiments. For example, I was in the 1st Battalion of the 5th Cavalry, and we had no horses. It was all Bradley infantry fighting vehicles and tanks. So it's what we call a heavy armor unit. The 1st Cavalry Division, even today, is still a heavy armor unit. There's no horses there. I'm not that old that I've been in the Army that long.
Okay, so you were in Desert Storm.
Correct.
With your division.
Yes.
And how long were you there?
We deployed. I was one of the first units from the 1st Cav to go to Desert Shield, Desert Storm. At that time, it was just Desert Shield. And we deployed about September. I think, if I remember right, Saddam Hussein attacked Kuwait in August. The 82nd Airborne Division went over initially, and then the 1st Cavalry Division was brought over on ships because we had to sail all of our tanks and Bradleys over there about a month later. So into about mid-September is when we arrived in country in Saudi Arabia.
So how large was your unit?
I personally commanded an infantry company, which is about 125 personnel. I had 14 Bradley fighting vehicles, as well as 4 M1A1 Abrams tanks in my company. And then we had engineers in my company, air defense artillery, and then all the logistics that goes with supporting that large of an organization.
And you were a new captain at this time.
I was. I'd only been a captain when I was given command about a year, a little over a year. I was 29 when I was given command, so within the Army rank structure and promotions, I was probably about right on track. Most company commanders between 28 and 29 years old when I was given command.
Okay, so you're a captain, and then what was the ranks? Did you have lieutenants under you?
I did. I had 3 platoon leaders. No, I had 4 lieutenants, 5 lieutenants, I'm sorry, because I had 3 rifle platoon leaders. I had an engineer platoon leader, and a forward observer lieutenant, was called the Fist. He ran all the indirect fires for me. And then, then a tank platoon leader, so 6 lieutenants I was in command of. And then all the sergeants and soldiers that go along with that. I think in country, I probably averaged about 160 men and approximately 25 to 30 combat vehicles in my organization in the command.
Did you have to participate in any kind of battle planning during that time?
We did. Desert Shield, the soldiers kind of nicknamed it the Big Sitzkrieg. We did a lot of training in those first months because we were in Saudi Arabia with the 7th Corps. The 1st Cavalry Division was sent over to Saudi Arabia as part of the 7th Corps, which was just south of the border between Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Iraq. And then the little neutral zone, it was called the neutral zone, that was between Iraq and Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. There's a little piece of terrain called the neutral zone. The neutral zone itself leads up what's called the Wadi al-Batin, which is a huge, they call it a wadi, but it looks like kind of a huge canyon that comes up there on the border, I believe, between Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait, the country of Kuwait. And that's where my division was at, was just south of that neutral zone, just south of the Wadi al-Batin.
So what were can you share some of the battle planning that you did?
Yeah, we did a lot of training at my organization because of the size of it. Was called the Advance Guard for the 1st Battalion and the 2nd Blackjack Brigade. My battalion was in the 2nd Brigade of the 1st Cav Division, and my organization that I commanded was called and did the operational focus of my company was called the Advance Guard. So as the brigade or division was attacking, let's say, you would have an organization like mine out in front to provide security, make that initial contact with any enemy forces or whoever that's out there in order to accomplish whatever mission they assign to us. And our whole focus at that time, about January, December, January, our focus became the attack up through the Wadi al-Batin as part of a feint exercise, as the remainder of the 7th Corps conducted its envelopment along the east flank. If you understand anything about Desert Shield or Desert Storm specifically, most of the attack went to the west of Kuwait and came in from the north and west. Our mission, as part of the 1st Cav Division, was to conduct a feint or attack up the Wadi al-Batin in order to, I guess, make the Iraqi command believe that that's where the main attack was coming from, was through the Wadi al-Batin. So by doing that, Saddam Hussein and his commanders moved a lot of their forces into the Wadi al-Batin in order to stop that, and took their focus off the flank so that the remainder of the 7th Corps could make that end around up to the north through Iraq. If that makes sense.
So you were the guys who set them up.
Right. We made the initial contact. In fact, the ground war started, I think, on the 23rd, and my organization had already crossed the border on the 19th. I was already in Iraq, in Kuwait, on the 19th of February, and then we made contact on the 20th in the Wadi al-Batin with Iraqi forces in order to support the feint by the 7th Corps going around. So when the ground war started on the 23rd, we'd already been in contact for 2 to 3 days prior to the ground war starting.
What was, as you're training for an officer, I understand that you have, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that you're trained to accept the anxiety and the pressures and all of that, to deal with that during the time that it's happening. How do you deal with that during that time? How do you deal with that after it's over with the battle?
Yeah. During operations, and we were over there, you just stay busy. If you sit around, and that's the thing I think that I try to instill in my young leaders and other soldiers that I had, is just stay as busy as you can, so you're not thinking about it, worrying about it. You kind of focus on the mission at hand, because as you've probably learned in some of these interviews, as soldiers are out there, we fight for those that are on our left and right, our fellow soldiers, and that's kind of what we worry about the most. As a leader, we just try to stay busy and stay focused on what the mission at hand was, and that's kind of the way you deal with it. As you come back and there's a lot of pressure. I can't stress that enough, how much pressure there is on young leaders. And I will tell you, the leaders today fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan, it's a completely different environment. So the pressures and their challenges are much different than, let's say, mine were as a commander in Desert Shield and Desert Storm. So, and I think the best way to deal with it is you talk about it. Talk to other soldiers and those that have had kind of a shared experience. Kind of helps you deal with those pressures and anxieties that you have after you've been in a combat situation. At that time, in Desert Shield, Desert Storm, we were just beginning to scratch the surface on what's called PTSD, post-traumatic shock, PTSD, post-traumatic syndrome. Yeah, I think it's post-traumatic
Stress
syndrome.
disorder.
Stress disorder, yes, thank you. Sorry, I couldn't think of the word. And I just think talking about it, I've done multiple interviews like this, and I just think it has helped me kind of deal with that, with the different firefights we were in, the different engagements they were in, and soldiers that were, wounded or killed. It just helps you kind of deal with that.
Did you lose any of your troops?
I did. Our first firefight, we had 3 killed in my company. I had 3 of my soldiers killed and 9 wounded. They received the Silver Star for in that attack up the Wadi al-Batin. We were the first ones to go up there, so we were the first ones to make an engagement. So, yes, we did. We lost 3 soldiers in our first firefight, and again 9 wounded in that first firefight. It was pretty intense, because in Desert Shield and Desert Storm, we were fighting distances, open terrain, long engagements. I mean, it wasn't house-to-house clearing like you see today like in downtown Baghdad or Kandahar and stuff like that. It was more long engagements. So larger caliber weapons were used. My Bradleys, the 25 millimeter chain gun, M1 tanks. We received a lot of anti-tank fire, as well as indirect fire from enemy artillery. So they were much more traumatic engagements, if that makes sense. Not taking anything away from Iraq and Afghanistan. It's just a different operating environment.
It was a totally different type of operation than in the previous wars, conflicts that we've had.
It was. The U.S. Army hadn't seen the large-scale units like that deployed since World War II, quite frankly. When we looked at a map, or when I looked at my map, you had the sector that the 1st Cavalry Division was in, and on the left you saw 1st Infantry Division, and on the right we had the old 24th Infantry Division, and those units were really there. I mean, that was kind of the thing. It was that kind of large-scale mounted movements, because we moved such great distances. I mean, we moved 300 miles in a matter of days. So, and all of that was done with tanks and Bradleys and armored personnel carriers and stuff like that.
Desert Storm, Desert Shield was also when the fatigues and the camo changed.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, we went to a desert. You'll see pictures of my soldiers wearing the woodland camouflage, and before we deployed over there, we got the desert camouflage. So, and all of our Bradleys and tanks in CONUS in the continental United States at Fort Hood was all painted woodland camouflage. So before we left, everything got repainted desert tan. So there was, for the unit to stand up and go on a deployment, there was a lot of different things had to occur in order to get ready for that operational environment. And a simple matter of painting all these Bradleys and tanks, which is not an easy task, in order to get us deployed over there. Plus then, the only way we got over there was through ships. And so at Fort Hood, we put all of our Bradleys and tanks on railroad cars, loaded them on trains, and they were shipped down to Galveston, Texas, where they were loaded onto what they call roll-on, roll-off ships, and then floated over to the Arabian Sea. And that's where they were offloaded at the Port of Daman.
So you actually did not travel with your equipment?
No. We sent 1 or 2 soldiers. Once the vehicles were on the ships, it was turned over to the Navy that was, shipping those vehicles over. We would put 1 or 2 soldiers on the ship that went with the equipment to make sure it started and stuff like that. But the remainder, me and the rest of my organization, we all flew on charter airlines over to the Port of Daman.
How long did it take for your equipment to get over there on the ship?
30 days, about a month. It did. It took them 30 days to sail over there. And so once we got everything, all of our combat vehicles loaded on, and then what we did at Fort Hood before we flew was worked on taking care of the individual soldier. We qualified on our weapons again. We made sure that all their personnel packets were squared away. Everybody had an up-to-date physical, an up-to-date will, just all the administrative stuff that soldiers get taken care of. We got all of our shots for deployment. Can't tell you how much fun that was, getting all those shots in one day. But that's kind of the stuff that we worked on once our combat vehicles were loaded. Just did individual soldier training until we were ready to be flown over to the country.
That's interesting. This is the first time that I heard that the soldiers had to have a will.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's required. Yep.
Was Desert Storm, Desert Shield the first time that's the soldiers?
No.
All soldiers.
It's always been that way.
It's always been that way.
Yeah. Anytime a soldier, sailor, airman, or marine is sent on a deployment, they have to have what's called an updated DEERS. Their emergency contact has to be updated. They must have a current will on file. You have soldiers in your organization. I had soldiers that are called dual military, where both the husband and wife are in the military. I was personally dual military. My wife was in the Army. And so if you have children, there's what they call a power of attorney, so that, if both spouses get deployed, where are your kid's going to go? Who's going to take care of them? And so that's all taking care of the soldier and his family, and making sure all of those administrative things are up to date.
What was during the time that you were focusing on the combat, did you have on time and off time during this focus? What was that like?
You're never really off, if you can understand what I mean. There's really no off time. What my unit did, I thought was pretty neat. Anywhere we went at battalion headquarters, we always established kind of a tent with food and movies. And so every so often, companies would rotate back to this little area just to relax. Soldiers didn't have to get up at a certain time. You could go watch movies in the tent. We barbecued a lot, and stuff like that. We ate pretty well over there. I got to tell you, on deployment, I ate better on deployment than I ever did back in garrison, back at Fort Hood, Texas. So, yeah, I would say we had some opportunities to do some different things. The first movie I saw in country was Pretty Woman with Richard Gere. I remember going back to we called it recuperation, rest and an R&R site, rest and relaxation site within the battalion, and yeah, we still had security. We still carried our weapons with us all the time. We still had to perform those basic missions, but a majority of the soldiers got a chance to relax. When you're up on the line and you're in operations, you don't get a lot of rest. You're always on, pulling security, doing what we call stand to, once to twice a day. So it was kind of a nice time just to kind of read letters, write letters home, and relax.
During this time, were you able to communicate to home with your family?
No. The only time, and that's, cell phones today make it a lot different. And I can tell you that because my wife, her last year after I retired, she was in the Army another 2 years. And her last year, she was deployed to Iraq on General Petraeus' staff at Camp Liberty in Baghdad. And I could call her in the middle of the day on my cell phone. We would email each other all the time. We also were able to Skype. We've got several kids. And so once a day I was able to Skype and we could talk to Mom. But in Desert Shield, Desert Storm, we communicated with mail. That's the only way, we would write a letter. And it would take 4 to 6 weeks for that letter to go from wherever we were at in the middle of the desert all the way back to the States. So we didn't have the ability to Skype and email, and we didn't have any of that. It was all by written letter. My brother actually was over there with the National Guard. He got deployed with his National Guard unit, and he'd been in country for a couple months. I'd been in the country for 4 or 5 months, longer than him, and we wrote each other a letter. We got each other's address, and I wrote him a letter. Come to find out, he was only 6 miles away from me. So one day I got to go visit him. As a commander, I had my own vehicle, so I got to drive over and go visit my brother in his unit. It was only 6 miles away, and he'd been there for several months, and we didn't know it.
So you say that you ate well, and so the food you must have had plenty of food.
We did. We had plenty of food. Not initially. When you go into what we call an immature theater, there's not a lot. But after we had been there for 2 to 3 months, why the food started to get a lot better. We ate a lot of MREs for the first month, 2 and 3 times a day, some days. But after we'd been there for 3 or 4 months, and the division finally came over. Remember, when I deployed my company over in September, the division itself didn't come over until like October, late October. So not until that happened did we start to get better food and stuff. And then when we did, we ate really well, very well.
I heard those MREs are pretty good, though.
Oh, they're real good. 1,500 calories at a shot. You get pretty hungry sometimes. I did lose a lot of weight when I was over there, but I think that was more because of stress than anything else. It wasn't because of the food or the lack of food. And then when we actually were pulled out, when President Bush at that time, President Bush Sr. made the decision to, we'd met the objectives and decided to come home. We all came as we were coming out. We came out. My unit specifically came out through Cobard there back at the Port of Damam again in Cobard Towers. We ate really well. We had cheeseburgers and all. I mean, you didn't have to pay for any of that. We had steak all the time. We had lobster all the time, cheeseburgers and everything else. So it was pretty nice coming back.
So you were over there and you completed your mission. The president decided that you were done.
Yeah.
And you were a captain. When did you become a major?
Actually, I didn't become a major for 4 more years. I was a captain for for 4 more years. Normally in the Army, you're a captain anywhere from 4 to 6 years. And I think I was promoted to major because it's all based on Congress. The promotions are for officers. And I didn't become a major until 4 years later. I made major, I think, in 96. So, yeah, 4 years, 1995, 96.
Did you go overseas at all anymore?
Just on different missions with different units that I was with. Not on a deployed status like I did for Desert Shield and Desert Storm.
And where were some of the places that you were stationed? Or that you've been?
Yeah. As in different units that I was in, let's see. I came back from Desert Shield, Desert Storm. I went to Fort Knox, where I was now an instructor. Remember, I did the Captain's Career Course, or what they call the Captain's Course there at Fort Knox at the Armor School. I was sent back to be an instructor after my combat experience. The Army kind of does that. They take the most experienced guys and make them instructors. And then I was sent to Fort Leavenworth, where I was an instructor, again, waiting to go to the U.S. Army Command General Staff College as a major. And while I was there, I did deployments to Korea, Hawaii, and then different parts of the continental United States. So the Hawaii deployments were pretty nice. I was there 4 times. So I have no complaints about my other deployments after Desert Shield and Desert Storm. So.
Now you said that you and your wife, or your wife was also in the Army.
Correct.
Were you always stationed together?
We were. My wife and I didn't get married until we were both majors. Actually, I had been promoted to lieutenant colonel She was a major, and then we were dual military after that, and we were stationed together after that. And the Army works pretty hard at trying to keep families together.
Do you recall what day your service ended?
It was, I came out of command of my battalion as lieutenant colonel in July. After command, I had so many days of accrued leave to take, and I think my last actual official day in the Army was 1 October, the 1st of October. I was already on what they called terminal leave, because I had built up so many leave days, so that when I retired, I could use those leave days until we got moved and everything else. My wife, who was a lieutenant colonel and still in, was sent to be the professor of military science at the University of Tennessee at Martin. And so we lived in Tennessee for the 2 years that she was a professor of military science at the University of Tennessee.
So your wife did not retire at the same time you?
No, she didn't. She didn't have as much time in. I had 24 years in, and when she went to Tennessee, she had 18. So she had 2 more years, or 17, correct. She had 3 more years to go. And then her 20th year, her last year in the Army, is when they sent her to Iraq, to Baghdad for a year. So we were separated for, I was a single parent for an entire year with our kids.
What made you decide to retire?
Good question. I've been a lieutenant colonel. I was headed to the War College. My youngest son Matthew, had just been born. Our next oldest son was Michael, who was 3 years old at the time. And coming out of battalion command, I had a year to wait to go to the U.S. Army War College as a colonel. And in that year, my family was not going to be together. I wasn't going to be with my family. And the Army, my branch, told me that more than likely I'm going to be separated from my family for the next 3 years. And so, my wife and I kind of had a long heart-to-heart. I mean, as you get older, you start to weigh, family and what we wanted to do for our family with young kids, and another deployment for 3 more years, not being together. And my wife wanted to go be a PMS at the University of Tennessee. That was something she wanted to do, and the Army wasn't going to keep us together. So we made the decision that we were going to put the family first, and I decided to retire.
After you retired from the military, what did you decide that your career was going to be?
That was tough. After being an infantry officer for 23, 24 years, I had really no idea what I wanted to do. My family business, the family business for my family is we raise and train American saddlebred horses, and so because of that, I decided to do that. And I came home and kind of I took over the family business from my parents, and we raise and train American saddlebred horses.
How do you think, first off, did you take any time off?
I did. I stayed, but I had to stay. It's not the kind of time where you just go on vacation. I try to keep busy, and I think we were building a new barn, a new facility as we expanded the family business, and so I was really just involved in that, and I think that helped my transition immensely. Staying focused every day and working to get the new facility up and running at the time and we built that there in Tennessee. We've since sold that part of the business and moved everything back up here to Central Illinois, where it's a little more American saddlebred friendly than it was down in Tennessee. So, but although that facility didn't work for us, it was good for me personally because it helped me with that transition from Army life to civilian life and kept me busy. I knew a lot of my friends that had retired after that and didn't really do anything or have anything they really wanted to do. So it was really, they had a real tough time making that transition. So I tried to, as I thought about what I wanted to do in life after the Army, was think about something that would keep me decisively engaged and kind of help me make that transition. And building that new facility really did. It paid off for me, I think.
So you have now been retired from the service for 6 years?
6
7
years, correct. Yeah.
Okay. You're now back in the family business. Your wife is now retired. So your children no longer are traveling.
Right.
And in the military life. How have they adjusted?
Actually, they've done better than I think my wife and I have. They really have. My youngest, our two youngest, don't really remember that life and the moving around that we did like our two older ones did. Our oldest son, Ryan, who's now 22, he had been in 3 different high schools growing up. Dylan was in 2 different high schools as he was growing up. So the two youngest really didn't see that aspect of it. And that's one of the reasons why we made the decision to get out that we did is, there becomes a point in your life where, you got to weigh which is more important to you. And talking to other senior leaders that we knew and had those experiences, we thought this was best for our family. To make that decision for me to get out. And so the two youngest, I think, have done really well, more so than the two older. The two older ones want nothing to do with the Army. The two youngest, when they grow up, that's what they want to do. So it's been kind of interesting to see that transition. They go to a great private school in Morton, Illinois right now. So it's been really good for them.
So may I ask, did any of your siblings or your parents, or did you have anyone in the service that before you that when you were growing up you said, I want to be in the service?
Yes, my father was in during Korea. I also had an uncle that was in during World War II, another uncle and several cousins that were in during Korea and in Vietnam. So it was, that it was just, to me, it was a logical transition. I wanted to be an officer. I didn't want to enlist and become enlisted. I always wanted to be an officer. And so I kind of focused everything I did on wanting to be an officer in the U.S. Army versus what some of, my cousins and uncles and my father did. They talked to me about, what to do. And I think I always had a desire to be an officer in the U.S. Army ever since I was young. And that was just kind of what I wanted to do when I grew up. I know. Did that answer the question?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Would you encourage young men and women to enlist today?
Absolutely. We always encourage our own kids to enlist or become an officer, and we've talked to quite a few parents and other friends of ours and their kids. A good friend of ours, their daughter is going on active duty right now. It helps pay for college, and that's the way I saw it as well. I knew I wanted to go to school and go to college, and so by becoming an officer, I got a scholarship from the U.S. Army, and that paid for my school. So I didn't have a bunch of school loans to pay off because I knew I wanted to go to college, and it was a way to pay for it. And I still encourage, kids and young people today to go into the military. You learn a lot about leadership, accountability, and again, it's a good way to pay for school and get some experience doing other things before you decide what you want to do with the rest of your life. A good friend of ours, his daughter right now is going on active duty, and she's in college. She's having a hard time because she doesn't really know what she wants to do, and so we've encouraged her, and she's going on active duty and has gotten college paid for that way. But she's just trying to figure out what she wants to do, and the Army is kind of a good fit for her right now to help her find out what she really wants to do with the rest of her life. Gives you a lot of experience on management and leadership and accountability, like I said. So, and I think a lot of employers, on the civilian side, see that and seek, individuals that have that experience with them.
There, between the different conflicts, the different wars, you have different reactions of soldiers coming home, and you hear of how World War II veterans were treated, and the Korean and the Vietnam, and the Desert Storm, Desert Shield veterans coming home. How do you think they were treated?
Oh, extremely well. I mean, it was overwhelming when we came home, and over there we had heard that as units rotated back, kind of the welcome they were getting as they come back, and it was really neat. I mean, as we were flying back into the United States, we came in through New York, and there was people there at the airport to meet us to tell us, thank you for your service, job well done, glad you're home. And then our whole trip home, I mean, it was all of the families and everybody else that comes and welcomes all these young men and women who have served their country, welcomed home. It's unfortunate that we did not have that during the Vietnam conflict, and there were other individuals coming out of Korea and World War II that didn't have that experience either. And so it's unfortunate that we didn't, but the welcome that we got as we came out and came back from Desert Shield and Desert Storm was 180 degrees opposite of that, and it made a difference. It really did. It made a difference to feel like you were recognized for all this that we had done. We would have done it whether we were recognized or not. It was just overwhelming. I will tell you, it was just a lot different than we expected. And today, even before I got out, I'd be flying someplace for something I was doing for the Army or whatever, and have my uniform on, and people would just come up to me and thank you for your service. I mean, it's really kind of overwhelming. I was several years ago, right after I got out, I still had a post sticker in my car in the window. And officers get a blue one, enlisted to get a red sticker, and I had a blue sticker in my car from my last duty assignment, which was when I was a battalion commander at Fort Leonard Wood. And I was going through the McDonald's drive-thru, and I get up to the window to pay for my sandwich, and the lady in the car in front of me had already paid for it because she saw the sticker, and told the girl to tell the guy in the car, thank you for your service. And she bought my cheeseburger that day. So it's just been really different. It's a completely different perspective. And I think even today with Operation Iraqi Freedom, as we withdraw troops from Baghdad and Iraq, and as we begin to withdraw those soldiers and sailors, airmen, and Marines from Afghanistan, they are also getting the same welcome home as well.
I have a couple more questions for you, and one of them is, while you were over there for Desert Storm, did you purchase any local type trinkets or memorabilia?
No, I did not. I did not. We weren't anywhere near any of that kind of stuff. I mean, when we went into the country, we arrived at the port of Daman, we got our tanks and our Bradleys and all our equipment, and we left. we got out of there. And then we were out in the middle of the desert for the rest of the war, for Desert Shield and for Desert Storm. And then as we came back, we were in the desert. They brought us. We brought all our equipment back. We had a lot of work to do to clean it, to get it out of the country and get it shipped back to the United States. And so we were just working feverishly to get that done. And we were at Cobart Towers. But we were never allowed out on the economy. We were kept separated, and I think there's some goodness in that, clearly. And then we came home. There was no opportunities. I personally wouldn't let my soldiers go hunting for souvenirs. We had a case in our unit where a soldier in another organization, not mine, but in another one, had went souvenir hunting and picked up an explosive device and was killed. And so I outlawed it in my organization, said nobody's doing that. And so everybody we took over, we tried to bring everybody home as safe as possible. And we did not bring any souvenirs and stuff like that home. Anything we did find, we turned it over, and it went to a museum someplace where it probably belongs, not some soldier bringing it home.
The other question I have is can you explain what War College is?
Yes, I absolutely can. As an officer in the Army, at different ranks, you attend different formal schooling. As a lieutenant, we go to the basic course. Excuse me. As a captain, we go to the captain's career course. As a major, we go to the Command and General Staff College. And then as a lieutenant colonel, full colonel, we go to the U.S. Army War College. And so the War College is there to teach senior leaders and senior officers how the Department of Defense, the U.S. Army operate within the confines of our government, our civilian-led government. And so the War College kind of focuses on strategic level planning and interface between, let's say, the U.S. Army, the Department of Defense, Congress, and those different entities. They teach you how to be a full colonel, so that you can walk and talk with some sense of understanding of how what we call the upper echelons actually function. Because it is complex. I mean, with funding and the type of equipment we have today, technology we have today, and interfacing with all these different organizations, it's fairly complex. And so the U.S. Army, at least, and as well as the other services, have the same system in order to train and teach individuals how to function and operate at different levels within the organization, within the overall structure of the United States Army.
Okay, one more question.
Sure.
As an officer, you have some perks, such as the officer club, and whether they're perks or not, but you have they're different than the NCOs. The NCOs have their clubs and situations like that, but you have entertainments or get-togethers and functions that are very nice functions. They used to have those. Do they still have those?
Yes, they do. The officer club system in the U.S. Army changed when I was a young officer, and those, you used to have, the Army had enlisted clubs, NCO clubs, and officer clubs, and the purpose of that was so that NCOs could go someplace, have a drink, whether it's alcoholic or non-alcoholic, and be able to discuss freely with their peers, what their challenges were, and just be able to develop that camaraderie within their group. Same thing with officers. You know, an officer, whether you're in uniform or not, just like a senior non-commissioned officer, we are always on parade. If you look at my military ID card as an officer, it doesn't say 9 to 5. Am I an officer? It's 24 hours a day. And so as an officer, whether I'm in uniform or civilian clothes, I'm still an officer, and I have to set an example that young soldiers, NCOs, and younger officers can emulate. And so I think that's why we had the different club system. When I was a young officer, that changed significantly, and we went to more of what we call a leader club, where it was the senior NCOs together with the officers, and then, you know, there were certain junior enlisted, junior NCO clubs that were together. So it kind of changed that, you know, today, and even today especially, all leaders, whether you're a senior NCO or an officer, you're still a leader, and those kinds of club systems are kind of gone. I wouldn't say that there's perks to being an officer. I think that's a misconception. Different from NCOs, I paid for all my uniforms. You know, that's still tradition. Officers have to pay for all their uniforms. NCOs enlisted, they're given all their uniforms. You know, the Army just gives those to you. So I wouldn't say there's a lot of perks. There's more responsibility and accountability as an officer. And I think there's even more accountability today than there was when I was a young officer. And so the operational environment of Iraq and Afghanistan, and I know I keep going back to this, has really changed the way the U.S. Army as a institution thinks and perceives its young leaders. Whether you're an officer or a non-commissioned officer, you are a leader, and the accountability of those officers is different whether you're an NCO or a commissioned officer, but you're still a leader at the end of the day, both ways. So I kind of disagree that there's perks. I didn't get any more perks. I just got more responsibility as an officer, and that's what you sign up for when you become an officer. I mean, that's why I wanted to be an officer, because I wanted to be a leader. I strove to be the best officer and the best leader I could in the time that I was in, and so to me that was the perk. Was the accountability and the opportunities to be in charge. That's what I wanted. I wanted to be the guy in charge. And so knowing that, there's just a lot more accountability that comes with that, a lot more pressures. You know.
That's what I was wanting you to tell us.
Yeah, you know, as an officer, the soldiers I had killed, I'm the one that wrote letters home to the family. It wasn't those NCOs. It was me. I'm the commander. I'm ultimately responsible. It's my responsibility, and I wrote letters home to those families on those soldiers that we lost. So there are no perks. It's about accountability and responsibility. That's really what it's about.
And Michael, I wanted to say something when you said that you took care of your soldiers over there, and that you made sure that they didn't go out and find souvenirs.
Right.
That you took care of those sons,
Yeah.
those husbands, those brothers, those sisters, those wives, whatever. And that's a command, an
Right.
officer in command.
Right.
That's what you do for your troops.
That's right. And they might not like it. And it ain't gonna, you know, there were a lot of days that I was not very popular, but you know, it's not a popularity contest. It's doing what based on my experience at the time was the right thing to do. So thank you.
Are there any other comments or anything you'd like to talk about?
Not really. No, I think I've probably talked enough. So.
Okay. Well, at this time, I would like to thank you for the time you've given me. I would also like to thank you for the time that you've given our country and served our country.
Thank you.
And I appreciate it.
Thank you.